School of Rock. Santa Ana.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonah David. I am currently a first-class petty officer musician in the United States Navy. I've been in the Navy for almost 11 years.
Right.
And prior to that, I was an international touring musician. I toured Europe with the Brooklyn Funk Essentials. I toured the U.S. with King Django. Probably been on, I don't know, about 100 recording sessions, mostly independent stuff. But the biggest claim to fame is I was the original drummer for an artist named Modest Yahoo, and on 2 RIAA Gold certified records, or certified gold records, and DVD, and got to do a whole bunch of touring with him as an artist. We did a live DVD, and we did a studio record as well. So there was total of four recordings: 2 studio recordings, 1 live recording, and 1 DVD. And it was after that that ended for me, and it was probably about I would say a year and a half after that I started my career as a Navy musician. So that's what I'm doing now. Now I'm an instructor at the Navy School of Music. I'm the only Navy billeted in the entire United States Navy. I'm the only Navy billeted sailor that's teaching drum lessons, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
It's like 300,000 sailors in the United States Navy.
You're that guy.
My job is to teach sailors
drum lessons.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's sweet, dude.
Yeah. If you think about it in those numbers, I have a pretty unique job.
Yeah, very unique job. Yeah, and even to be in the service at all, man, is, you know, a small percentage of the population at large, and then to be the guy that teaches everybody how to play drums in the service, that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, it's cool. And, you know, as you would know, I mean, having served yourself, and
sure. That's where we met. Yeah, in
employment together.
That's right. We sure did. Of all the people in that band, man, you're just a lucky guy when it comes to numbers. Of all the people in that band, there were 45. I think that band's billeted for. There were 4 of us that went on the ship. I had just come.
Going. Just the brass band's going. Just the rock band is going.
Just you guys.
4 guys that have never played together. You guys are going.
Yeah. I just came from Japan. I was like so ready to like not be on. I'd been on 9-month deployments in Japan. You know, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to Chicago. Not a sea around, not an ocean for miles. This is gonna be great.
And then the first thing they do is they put us on that plane,
dude.
And you're going to Jacksonville.
Drop your bags. You're getting on the ship. Yeah, that was
awesome.
That was good. But some good moments, man. We got to be on a Canadian ship. I had never been on a Canadian ship before. That was pretty cool.
I'm still friends with some of the people that we saw over there.
Yeah. I talk to Kristen often.
Out there, if you check this out, we have to go tag him in this.
That's true. Yeah. Kristen has been seeing it. She's married to a Navy guy now, and yeah.
Hey, Kristen. How's it going?
I'm sure she will catch this. Yeah.
This is way off topic, but I think Blaine's got like a podcast that they talk about hockey.
Oh, what?
Yeah, he's got a. I think he's got a podcast. They talk about hockey. He's pretty. He's hilarious.
That sounds like interesting to me, but probably like half of Canadians have a hockey podcast. To me, that sounds like novel, but probably in Canada, they're like, "Oh, you have a hockey podcast, obviously."
Yeah, it's a prerequisite job.
As a matter of fact, on the citizenship application for Canada, do you have a hockey podcast or intend to start one within the next 6 months?
That's exactly it.
Fully, man. Awesome. Well, welcome, Jonah, man. Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for taking the time today to hang out with us a little bit, share some of your experience.
Any time for you, brother.
Yeah.
Anytime.
What got you into playing? How did you start learning the drums?
So what got me into playing and how I started learning, I think those are two good questions. They're kind of different. And when I think back of as far back as I can remember, of all the things I really ever wanted to do, it was play drums.
Yeah.
And I believe that came about because at one point my older brother played drums, and I must have been 1 or 2 years old and heard them or saw them, or at some point in my subconscious, I just had the idea of playing drums. And I remember having a toy little Casio keyboard, and you can adjust sounds, you know.
Okay.
2 AA batteries.
Yeah, the little buttons on there, and the demo mode and plays the song.
tiny little presets.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being young and having this toy, and there was a button you'd press and you get drum sounds.
Mm.
And I remember very vividly like playing the two hi-hats and like and I don't even recall. I wasn't listening to jazz at that time. I mean, this was kindergarten. This was
Yeah, very
just,
young.
I just knew that was something that always interested me.
Mm.
And I didn't start playing until much later in life.
Mm.
At one point, I found some drumsticks and I got a hold of them in middle school, and I wanted to try and take lessons, but I didn't really have any type of coaching or mentorship or any instruction whatsoever.
But your brother was playing still at this time though, or
No, he
okay.
just had them, and I am pretty sure that by the time I ever really looked for drums in the house, they were gone.
Oh, okay.
I think my brother just had this moment of just wanting to play. Now, my brother's 11 years older than I am.
Oh, okay.
And so my guess is that he was like 12 or 13 and playing drums, and then at some point just didn't want to do it anymore, and they went away.
Sure.
So it was interesting, but I think somehow now the other thing is my brother was always into music. My father was always, so they were always playing music,
listening to it. Sure.
Listening to music. Yeah. I grew up listening to the Beatles, the Weavers, folk music, Simon and Garfunkel. Yeah. My brother was into Frank Zappa. He was into Miles Davis, especially the electric stuff and Bitches Brew. Oh, yeah. He was into the Grateful Dead, but he was also into, rhythm and blues. Oh, yeah. And
good stuff.
The Mississippi Delta. My father also played. There was, whenever we get in the car, there would, what was the name of that oldies? There was a show, Uncle Brucey playing the oldies on this, and so doo-wop and Motown and all that stuff. I mean, it was constantly playing music.
Nice.
So I had always sort of been interested in it. And then a friend of mine, when I was about 16, he had a drum set, and he and I'm going to shout out to him now. His name's Sean Jaffe, and his younger brother is also a phenomenal bassist. Okay. And still plays quite a bit. But Sean Jaffe had a drum set. And I was at this point a teenager, and we were playing role-playing games, and he was a dungeon master, and it was a lot of fun, as some of us nerds,
Oh yeah.
Doing. And he had a drum set, and he showed me how to play a paradiddle, and that was the first thing anybody had ever showed me on drum set. Yeah, and it was just like, this is a paradiddle. Paradiddle. I remember sitting down on the drum set, and I had seen drums around. I remember, I did some child theater when I was younger, and there was a pit. Okay. Oh, the drums, and I go to the drums, but I never tried to play. But he showed me this paradiddle, and I just remember just sitting down with the hi-hat and the snare drum and just, and that was it. I was hooked.
Sold. Yeah.
It was the first thing that I could really ever say, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, but I'm going to continue playing drums.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to be part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so not long after that, there was a garage sale somewhere, and some guy was selling some drums, and I spent $50 and I got a drum set. And
what was it? Do you remember what kind of kit you got?
I don't.
5-piece, 3-piece, little something. Yeah.
It was red, and it was $50. Now the guy, and I no longer have these cymbals, but the guy sold me a bunch of Vituses for $50 as well. And those, if I had sold them today, would probably worth several $100s.
Oh, okay. Those appreciated in value over that time.
Yes, they were in my opinion. I mean, the old customs, the old Ks are the vintage Zildjian cymbals that everybody, the story goes, you find someone that's got something in their attic, and it's like $1,000 for this one cymbal.
Okay.
But the Vituses in the 70s were actually very, very good cymbals, and I think they just have this unique sound, and it was just great for what I was doing at the time.
Yeah.
So I just started taking lessons. I started taking lessons with a guy named Steve Decker, and I'm going to tag him in this video as well.
All right.
Milburn Music, which I don't think is open anymore. And I just started playing drums, and
that was back in Jersey, right? That was back
in New Jersey.
Yeah. Okay.
Milburn Music was in Milburn, obviously,
Okay.
Milburn, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And there was a jazz band in Columbia High School, and there was a drummer named Dan Halpern. He's an educator now, and I think he teaches at Rutgers. I'm not entirely sure, but he's a music educator.
Cool.
And he was the guy who, you know, played drums in the jazz band. I mean, he had just been playing longer, and he had this experience. So I played congas and auxiliary percussion.
Oh, sweet.
And the best musicians that were around. So New Jersey had, and from what I was recalling, there was basically two scenes when I was playing drums. There was this hardcore sort of rock scene,
punk rock, heavy,
and there was a straight edge scene.
Okay.
And I think the name of the band was like 25 to Life or something like that. There was this straight edge band that actually wound up you know, becoming famous for a number of reasons, aside from the straight edge movement and everything associated with that. There was on the road, and then there was a band that played across the street from my house, and they had gigs, and they were called the Hot Bagels.
Ooh.
And Mark Holcomb, I'm going to tag him in this too. Mark Holcomb was a guitarist in that band, and he is still a phenomenal musician. I mean, this guy was just playing. There was so many good musicians. I can't remember his cousin Sean Laurie, who also I think has a doctorate in music now.
Oh wow.
I think he's in Canada. But there was just so many good musicians that were in this area. But the best educators were all jazz musicians, because we're really close to New York.
Sure.
So at some point I went over to the New Jersey School of Percussion, where Joe Morello was teaching. And I wasn't studying with Joe Morello. I was studying with Glenn Weber, who owned the school.
Okay.
And Glenn Weber taught thousands of drummers in the area. And he's just a fundamentals guy. And then I was studying with a guy named Yaron Israel. And at this point, I knew I was hooked. And Yaron Israel, I think he's the head of percussion at Berklee School of Music.
Yes. Yeah. He's still there. I think he was when I was there. I think he's there now. Yeah.
Yeah. So Yaron Israel he started teaching me. And there were some other lessons I had. Cecil Brooks III is another great jazz musician. So I just had I had access to these jazz musicians.
Yeah.
And then at some point, and I'm gonna just give a shout out to, you know, everybody that really helped me along. I went to Drummers Collective. I wound up doing a couple of different semesters at Drummers Collective.
Okay.
At the time I was there in the 90s, you know, I was studying with Duduca de Fonseca, who taught, you know, he wrote this book on Brazilian drumming. So,
nice.
And that's one of the, you know, the sort of the most famous
foundational. Yeah.
And Bobby Sanabria was there. Bobby Sanabria he's got a multi-Grammy winning composer, band leader, arranger, and he teaches at Manhattan School of Music. And I studied with Ian Froman, who is still associated with the collective, and he is a phenomenal.
So any good musicians then were there, or like
there was I mean, everybody
like
except
best.
For me. I felt like
dude,
you know,
the best people ever.
Like I was the guy at the bottom of the
That's
table.
the best, man. That's what you want. You want to be the guy that can learn from all of these other people. And then at some point you want to trade that, you want to be that guy teaching people. But in the beginning, you'd want to surround yourself with people that you're like, I have no business being in the same room with this dude, because you're going to learn everything. You're going to learn so much.
That's right. So here's I'm going to say the first big lesson, if you're going to take something away for an up and coming, you know, so just a, you know, background of me. I mean, I've played a lot of reggae music, and I can get a little bit more into that too, but I played a lot of reggae music. I studied a lot of jazz and a lot of hip hop. Those, I would say, that funk, hip hop, jazz music, and reggae are probably the three most dominant styles,
influences. Yeah.
And so at some point I was learning a whole lot of drums and not a lot of music. And you can learn a whole lot of scales and a whole lot of chords and not be able to play anything. Sound musical.
Absolutely.
Right? So I was going to these jam sessions. There were these Oregon jazz jam sessions.
Oh yeah.
And they were at this, it's a restaurant that's no longer in existence, but it's called the Peppermint Lounge in East Orange, New Jersey. Rodham Schwartz was the organist.
Okay.
And there, I can't remember the name of the guitarist, and the drummer Don. I can't remember Don's last name. Anyway, I'll probably get. They're gonna give me flack for it. But anyway, it's the same man. So I used to go play these tunes, and I just didn't learn tunes. I wasn't learning music. I wasn't learning music. I was learning rhythms. I was learning independence. I was learning drums.
Yeah.
But I wasn't playing.
Right. You're learning letters. You're learning words and letters, but you're not putting them in phrases. You're not reading books. You know, you're like ABCs all day, but then like, yeah.
And the thing is, when you're dealing with music as a language, as you very well know,
right.
Just because you can play rock and roll and you're great at playing rock and roll doesn't mean that you can play South Indian music.
It's a different language. I mean, it's a different
it's a totally
vocabulary, a different everything. Yeah.
Different everything. Yeah. So you have to learn the music. And then so I'll give you this one little story. This was probably the most one of the most influential moments, impactful moments of my musical career. So I'm playing at this jam session, and I'm just trying to play drums, and I'm getting eyeballed, and the place is packed. I mean, the Peppermint Lounge between the restaurant and the bar, sat like, close to 300 people.
Oh yeah.
I would
popular spot,
150, 200 people. It was
people
a great
knew,
night. Yeah. And all of a sudden I'm up there, and he's one of my dear friends. He's an amazing professor. He teaches at Juilliard. He does tons of things. His saxophonist named Bruce Williams. I'm playing, and I'm hitting drums. I'm not playing.
Sure.
I'm just hitting drums. There's music happening around me. I am not part of this.
Right. Yeah.
And I hear Bruce, and he's starting to yell at me. And I'm continuing to play, and he's yelling at me, and I don't really know what's going on, but he's just cursing me out. He's like pulling me out. He is just digging into me in front of all these people.
Yeah.
And I don't know who the guy was, but at some point another, and I'm probably like 17 years old at this time.
Yeah.
Another 16, I'm 16, 17 years old. Another drummer just come over and took the sticks out of my hand and just started playing. And people started applauding me leaving the stage.
Yeah. Right. That's a cutting session, man. I mean, like that,
Right. But that was humbling.
Yes. And that is what they are designed to do. That experience is exactly what cutting sessions are for. I mean, like that's it.
It was a cutting session. It was a jam session, and there was a lot of great musicians that went through those sessions. Those guys. And so Bruce and the band is playing, and the band starts cooking, and they're just having a great time. Yeah. And Bruce comes up to me, and he is just telling me off. Yeah. He's
letting me in. Yeah.
I'm not going to use all the words that he said.
It's a family show. Yeah.
Yeah, family show. I mean, but he is going in. You're not listening to the music, blah, 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 and this and that. And he's talking about his experience when I was in school, and they had me in front of the class, and the teacher would cover my horn, and every three measures he would take the horn off, and I had to keep track of the changes in front of the whole class. And he's yelling at me, and he's yelling at me, and he's yelling at me. And then he stops yelling at me and comes in right as one soloist is ending, and he just walks in on the front of the stage and starts soloing. Like the moment. Like, and you screaming, need to do blank and blank and blank this too. You blankety blankety blank, and then he just starts soloing right on the top of the tune, like he was ready to go.
Knew where it was. Top of the tune's right here. Yeah,
exactly. And then afterwards, they took a break. Mm-hmm. That was the beginning.
That's how it started. Yeah.
Break. The organist, Rodham Schwartz.
Yeah.
James Stewart, the saxophonist, who plays. He's a bari player. He's not a bari player. He's a tenor player.
Okay.
And Bruce Williams, they come over to me, and now we're not on the bar side anymore. We're on the restaurant side. I mean, there's people in suits eating.
Yeah.
It was an amazing soul food restaurant, and these three gentlemen just start going in on me. And the moment that someone stopped talking to take a breath,
it was the next dude's turn.
Just came right in.
Right. Yeah. Relentless.
Like an hour and a half, man. And I just, because I was still, I was a teenager, and I had an ego, and I'm like studying, and they knew I was taking lessons, and they knew I was practicing.
Sure.
So they weren't just kicking me out.
Right.
They were giving me the love.
Right.
That they
cared.
The wake up call.
They cared about you. They're like, if you want to do this, you need to hear this.
That was the wake up call.
Right.
And they went in on me, I said, you know what? I'm going to come back to the session. I'm not going to play for like 9 months, some ridiculous amount of time, 6 months, 9 months. I'm like, I'm just going to come and watch.
Listen,
I'm not going to play.
Watch, observe. Yes.
And so, but here's the thing. So that spread. And so like the next week, like the next day, another drummer, a friend of mine, Noel Sagerman, called me up and he's like, hey man,
heard about the gig. Yeah.
How are you doing? Yeah. Are you okay? Right. My teachers are hearing about it. Like, I mean, small community, the jazz community is a small community.
Yeah.
And so then another saxophonist, and his name is I'm not in touch with him anymore, but he came, he's like, hey man, you want to come over? He's like, I got a gig. I'm going on a cruise ship. You want to come on over? So I'm like, yeah, man, I'll come on over. And he let me borrow like 20 CDs.
Oh,
he's
nice.
Like, you need to be listening to this.
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, I heard about what happened. You need to start listening. Yeah. And so for like 6 months, I just practiced and I just listened to music.
Yeah.
And I just practiced learning tunes, playing music.
Yeah.
And I didn't go play in front of anybody else. And I just started listening.
Right.
And I learned music. And I started, and then I started at some point, I was studying with Lenny White.
Oh yeah.
Who, you know, the drummer from Return to Forever.
Return to Forever, one of my favorite bands ever. Yeah.
Legendary drummer.
Yeah.
And so, and he was, and I was going back to, and I was still studying. I was studying with Ian Froman. I went to another semester at Drummers Collective. And that time when I went back for the second time, I'm like, hey, wait, I'm not the worst guy here anymore. Like,
hey, all right. Not the worst. Nice.
You know, and so then it was about 9 months and I went back to the jam session.
Okay.
And they called a tune that I didn't know, but it was a Rhythm Changes.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I was like,
familiar.
Yeah, I was like, familiar. I've been listening to Rhythm Changes. Right. I at least know
how it's supposed to sort of sound, the form, right?
I kind of got the form.
Right.
And there was this trombonist there. I can't remember his name either, but he's an older gentleman. I don't even know if he's still with us. But he was always this kind soul of a person. He's like, come on, Jonah, you'll play come and play with me tonight. Play with me tonight. So he was inviting me up to play.
Okay. Yeah.
And you know what? And I played and I marked the 8-bar phrases.
Yeah.
And I was comping.
Yeah.
And we did trading and I kept the time.
Yeah.
And I was doing my spangalang, spangalang, spangalang. And I got off stage and I see Bruce Williams is standing right there. Staring at me and he's holding his horn. He's just fingering on his horn.
Yeah.
And he says, sound good, man.
Oh, high praise, dude. That is high praise. Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
You know, from making my skin tough, from toughening up my skin and just ripping the ego out of me and just saying, dude, you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
To like, you sound good, man. And it took
like 9 months plus a whole lot of tears and sweat and blood and playing. And it sounds a lot like the plot to this movie you may have seen called Whiplash.
I've never seen it. Yeah. I don't want to see it. I lived through that.
Man. You don't need to see it.
You know, people are like, you got to go see Whiplash. I'm
based
like,
on
good. I went to music school.
Yeah.
Went to the New School of Music, to New School of Jazz. I went to Mason Gross. Like I've done it.
It should just have a little tagline based on Jonah David's life.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't have anybody like throw anything.
Literally, yeah, right.
But I mean, I was threatened with violence by musicians before about how I played.
Yeah, but come on, man. Like, how were you handling your turnarounds, though? I mean, like 4 on the floor. What were you doing? You know, what did you do to deserve that? You know,
what did I do to deserve that? So, all right. So, I would listen to a record, or I would. Oh no! Here, this is really the example. This is one of the things that happened. I think that night. So I was studying with Bobby Sanabria, right? And Bobby Sanabria showed us at the time I was at Drummers Collective. He showed us this like wawanko with like a clave in your left foot.
Okay.
And there's just no reason to just do that out of nowhere.
Like, it sounds cool, but not in that circumstance.
Why am I doing that?
Right.
Or like, okay, so this was another. So, or like I would listen to. You know, like I think I remember that evening, like one of the things that happened that night was I think it was that night. It could have been one of those other nights that I may have gotten some squirrely eyeballs. there's this one recording. I can't tell you which one it is, but there's Philly Joe Jones is playing, and he does this thing where he insinuates this double time. He's like insinuating this double time with the hi-hat.
Okay.
And I was just trying to do that in a tune that
just randomly
falling for it.
Yeah.
And I was trying to push the band to do it. And it was like, you know,
it wasn't happening.
Like 16-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid.
Right. Trying to push the band around. You got these like 70-year-old guys up there on clarinet that have been playing with Miles Davis. And you're just like, and you're trying to push them around.
Like guys that were really making, you know, I was still living at my parents' house.
Sure. Right.
These are musicians that are out there making a living playing jazz music, serving the community, serving the jazz community and supporting the jazz community, making the jazz community a better community and being paid, you know, I mean, these guys were playing,
paid gigs. I mean, that was their thing. 5-6 days a week. They're gigging. That's their life. Yeah.
You know, hey, we need you to sub, you know, for like the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra. I mean, it was like these level of guys, like guys that had, you know, been playing for, that was it. And
there's this little 16-year-old punk kid
doing something that was not appropriate. I was, you know, just not in the music. And that was a big thing. So learn the music. I'm telling this to my students now. The music is going to dictate what you will play.
Right.
The music will dictate what you will play. And if you know the music, and Lenny White would talk about this, you know, there's a repertoire. There's a vocabulary of rock tunes. If you want to be in a bar band or if you want to play classic rock tunes, you should probably get some Led Zeppelin under your belt. You should probably get some John Bonham under your belt. You should probably check out, you know, the Foo Fighters. If you're trying to be an electronic drummer, you know, starting with drum and bass and moving into, you know, what the trap drumming and all that stuff. I mean, you know, there's a repertoire. Yeah. And so, you know, that's not the same. It's a different language. So you have to learn the music. The music is going to dictate what you play.
Yeah, because you can
of the style.
You can be perfectly amazing jazz drummer, rock drummer, Latin drummer, whatever. You take you out of that place and put you in a different band. I mean, like John Bonham's a phenomenal drummer, but if you put him down back behind like the timpani and the percussion section of a classical orchestra, you're not going to know what to do. Even though it's drums, it's percussion, but it's just a completely different setting. You have to know that vocabulary, that language specific to that setting.
And even with like the percussion realm, if you were talking about mallet solos and etudes, and I mean, they use a lot of the same repertoire shows up on 80% of the auditions. Yeah. So having that together is very important. But there's only so many, you know, plants that you can water throughout the course of your lifetime. There's only so much sunlight and so much water. And occasionally you get these amazing musicians that can just do it all.
Just about anything. Sure.
You know, I mean, just their aperture is so big. Like,
I think of Chick Corea or like
these Chick Coreas or like, you know, who's my gosh, I'm spacing out here. Peter Erskine, right? Peter Erskine can do a lot of different things. Right? He's a phenomenal musician. Mm-hmm. And even so, and even like within the jazz community, like, you know, and I want to also just give a big shout out to, you know, one of the teachers that really, I mean, the guy who really took me under his wing for a period of time and also mentored me just as a human being is Ralph Peterson. Okay. Ralph Peterson, I started studying with him at the New School, and he was at Rutgers. Yeah. And he was the guy I was studying with up until I started touring with Modest Yahoo. Okay. And even at that point in college, he said, listen, stop going to jam sessions for a little while and just do what I tell you to. And he took my comprehension to the next level. He took my listening to the next level. Yeah. My understanding of music, my understanding of how to listen within a rhythm section in a jazz setting into the next level. Yeah. And I've used those same skills throughout everything else that has gone on in my musical career. And even after about 2 years of studying with him, he's like, okay, start going to jam sessions. When I started going to jam sessions 2 years later, I felt, at least for a little while until I left to go on tour, like I could go to these jam sessions. Like I would go, into New York, and there were sessions at Smalls, there were sessions at Cleopatra's Needle. There were some of these jam sessions, and I would go and play, and I wouldn't be clueless. Like I can contribute. I can contribute something.
Yeah.
So Ralph really straightened me out with that. So I just wanted to give him, his respect.
Nice.
But like, I wouldn't hire. Like Ralph can do. I mean, he can play so many. He can play so much drum, and he plays trumpet, and he plays piano. He writes. He's written all these things.
Yeah.
But like, I don't like. You wouldn't call him for like a death metal gig, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
You wouldn't call him with something where your feet have to go like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Double bass and right. It's a different thing.
And the guy who can do that metal gig,
right, is not gonna
probably can't.
Right.
One last story. Like, so I'm really good friends with Glenn Sobel. He plays with Alice Cooper.
Okay. Yeah.
Glenn Sobel. Glenn, I love you, brother. And so he's a good friend of mine. I mean, we're friends, and he's on the road with Alice Cooper. Yeah, man. And he won like it's like small gig. I don't know if all young guys.
I don't know if you've heard of this guy, Alice Cooper.
Kind of a small gig, but
he's old now. I mean, who listens to old people anyway?
Who listens to old people, right? Johnny Depp's in his band. I don't know if you know who that is. But,
dude, Nita Strauss, man, one of my favorite guitar players, man. Like, she's amazing. She plays with Alice Cooper. She tours with him, or did before all this stuff. But
I mean, it's true. I mean, everything's. But I talked to him, and he's won like the drummer. He's run like a modern drummer festival, man, or like the Guitar Center drum off. He won the Guitar Center. He won the Guitar Center drum off like the year I got serious about playing drums or something like that, 90 or something.
Yeah.
And, he'll be the first to tell you, like if he had like a restaurant gig where he had to just play jazz for like a couple hours.
Yeah.
It would sound horrible.
Bored to tears, just not wanting to be there. Like the opposite of that guy that was like excited at the wrong gig. He'd be like super like just depressed. Like, this is my life. Why am I here?
The blues, man.
Right.
Like, I cannot swing the blues for, like 10 minutes. It's just not going to happen.
It's the good news and the bad news about talking about it, like the vocabulary and talking about these different genres, is that the bad news is like, there are specific things in each genre that you have to learn, fundamentals that you have to play that style. And without it, you really can't sound natural in that style. The side of that coin is there are canons of things and very accessible things that, like, say you want to learn to be a Latin drummer, you want to learn to be a rock drummer or whatever, you just search on YouTube or you go wherever. I mean, there are canons. Many people before you have done this, and so like, if you want to learn it, it is there. The good and the bad is you have to do that for each genre respectively and with respect, but there is a fairly limited canon in each group this is the rock canon that you must know. This is the blues canon you must know. And then there are lots of things in addition to that, but the foundation is pretty well worn, pretty well set,
So I think this is a good discussion, because I think there's inevitably two paths that you can take, and you can still live within, as you mentioned, you can still immerse yourself in a canon of music and take that. But I think there's two paths, and the first is, do you want to be a musician? Do you want to be a sideman? Or do you want to be an artist?
Sure.
And if you want to be an artist, then you can get inspiration from your music
anywhere
by listening to the squirrels run around on your rooftop.
And you should that's how you come up with anything new or creative. I mean, like,
I mean, so, but if, and obviously, you could be a rock guy. You can still have your influences,
sure.
But like real artistry, like this, you have to know what hat you're going to wear. I mean, you can still be steeped in a style,
right? And
have a direction musically of what you like to do. Like if you want to be an artist as a rock musician or a jazz musician or whatever, but you have to be willing to sort of embrace a number of different things and just put your own creative music forward.
Sure.
Now, if you're going to be a sideman, if you're going to be a musician, your job really is to support that artist that's
cutting your check,
paying you to play.
Right. Absolutely. 100%.
So the level of responsibilities are very, very different.
Yeah.
They're very different jobs.
Sure.
And you can switch your hat from back and forth. Like that, for example, a very good friend of mine who was the bassist for Modest Yahoo and the trio that we had, Roots Tonic. The guitarist is Aaron Dugan, but the bass player, Josh Werner, he just released a record called Mode for Titan.
Okay.
It's all bass compositions.
Oh.
And he painted the cover, and he
sweet.
gets into these intense painting sessions. Like he put out another record prior to that where every composition that he wrote, and it was singer-songwriter oriented,
okay,
but every composition was accompanied by a painting.
Yeah, that's
cool. And he talks about it in this interview in Bass Magazine where he gets into this really intense painting.
Yeah.
Where he's moving colors around and he's trying to express himself in this completely different medium.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he's coming back to music and songwriting, and whether he's playing piano and he's playing guitar or he's playing bass. So being an artist, being a real true artist is a very different thing if you want to put your music out there.
True. Yeah.
So and then, you know, like for example, let's look at this as an example, right? So let's say you're a sideman and you want to play jazz music, because that's what that's a lot of what I'm teaching now at the School of Music. I give the guys, you know, a bunch of different things, but most of these guys don't know how to play jazz. And as an American musician, I think it's as a drummer, considering that the drum set is there because of jazz music, you know, you have to learn how to play. So, but let's say you want to play jazz music. Well, like, who do you want to check out, right? You could say, I want to check out Art Blakey, Max Roach, Philly Joe Jones.
Sure.
Maybe you start moving forward a little bit. Elvin Jones, you know, Tony Williams, Jack DeJohnette. I mean, and there's hundreds of other guys to check out, but those are some of like the big five. And there's more than that. I mean, you know, there's more than I know I'm leaving out, but this is just for the start. But let's say you want to be an artist, and you're a drummer, right? Like, so maybe it's like Max Roach, but you know, I'm a singer too, so I want to sing. So Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah.
And maybe I want to check out like, you know, Picasso and Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
And you know, like, I don't know, I'm thinking of
artists that express like themselves.
Italo Calvino is an author or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So now you're looking at these other different forms of creativity, and like, well, what is that going to turn you into as a musician?
Yeah.
Right. So you're going to be a different animal. You're going to breed a different animal.
Yeah. I would say though, in addition to that, that's certainly true. And I think it's important, no matter what your genre is, to understand that as an artist, although your goal, I think, as an artist, or like what happens as an artist, is you try to break through boundaries and express yourself in a new way that hasn't come before. Right. Recognizing that no matter what you do, it's based on something from somewhere. I mean, although you're not expressly studying just jazz, folks, you are getting your influences from elsewhere. What you're doing as the artist is synthesizing that information, right? So my job as an artist is not necessarily to, like, there's still a canon of rock music and jazz music and blues music, and Picasso is in his own right, you know, with the Expressionists or his Blue Period colors, whatever it is that you want to say. Like, they in their turn have canons that exist. So yes, you can and should synthesize all that information. But with respect to, I think what's getting me about that is, I think that people call themselves artists and they're like, oh, I pull from here and I pull from there. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you know about Picasso and his period? You just like the painting, which is cool, but I feel like you may not be giving the respect to where that came from. You're saying that, like, I invented this new thing, but what you're really doing is synthesizing stuff. And so you should pay homage and to respect where those things came from each place, you know?
100%.
Yeah. Right.
100%. I mean, so, you know, Bobby Sanabria, you know, I remember I was his roadie for a little while.
Sweet.
And we'd be driving around and we'd be driving to New York, and he's like, we drove by this one statue and he's like, look at those boots see those boots? He's like, they're in style now. And this is a guy from 200 years ago.
Yeah.
He was, there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun.
That's right.
And the truth is that if your pockets aren't really deep, you're not going to write a country record. You're not going to listen to one country record and write a country record.
Right. Yeah. Probably not. Maybe.
If your pockets aren't really deep in a information,
Right.
then the people who have done their homework
Yeah.
are immediately going to smell you
Right.
out.
Yeah.
You're going to be
Of course.
thought out as
That's people's whole life. I
just
mean,
jumped on the
you're
bandwagon.
talking about somebody's whole life is study. Like there are people that just study, you know, Max Roach. I mean, there are people that just play his tunes to exclusivity and are amazing drummers and amazing performers. That's all they do. So you go there and you're like, oh, I pull from Max Roach. And they're like, oh, well, what, you know, where, or how did you get that? And it's like, well, I mean, I just listened to this one record. And this guy's like, dude, like I was in the studio with him. I know what session, I know what kit he played on this day. He changed his heads on Wednesdays, you know, like,
you know, it's so true. It's so true. I think ultimately, what I made that I told you that story about selecting these 5 different sources of influence, not to tell you that's how to do it, but it's to be receptive to the idea that you're going to have to, just like in business, you're going to have to find things that have not been juxtaposed and start to look at different ways to express yourself.
Absolutely.
Even if it's within a very specific genre.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the truth of it is because we're all I'm Jewish. We're all spiritual people. So whatever, whether or not you believe in, God or not, I believe in God. And I believe that we all have this unique divine spark, neshama, whatever you call it. So even if you add all of those different influences, something inside of you is going to come out that is going to be unique.
That's right. Absolutely.
It is going to be unique.
Right.
You get 100 drummers, get the same sticks on the same drum set, and the same beat with the same RPM, and
all
it's not
different.
going to be exactly the same.
That's
they're going to play it a little. There's going to be micro differences.
Yeah.
So ultimately, you really have to find something that you love. And generally, what happens is somebody hears an instrument, or they hear there's a record, there's something that just gets
spark, that thing.
That thing. And they're like, I want to do that. And that's what I forget what they call it in learning, like the law of primacy, I believe. Like the first thing, it's why it's so important to learn something correctly the first time.
Sure.
It's difficult to unlearn things.
Yes.
So if you get that first, in some ways, like some of my favorite music was my father's favorite music.
You were listening to that in the background. I mean, you had no choice really, but you were listening to it all the time. Yeah.
Right. Now it's not like I haven't developed a palette for other amazing, styles of music, but
Absolutely.
some, like I still listen to, like I have a real emotional experience. Like I can think of a song, and my father passed away, but I can think of a song for the band with like Levon Helm singing, playing drums, and some of the music that he had on, and I could start crying by just how beautiful some of these tunes are. Like some of the stuff
connects with you.
To. And I think that's natural. I think that's
absolutely
natural.
Absolutely.
So that's so the music. I'll say it again. The music is going to dictate.
Yeah.
The music is going to dictate what you play.
That's right.
And what you should play or when to play it. And
so after getting so the music dictated you all the way around the world, man. So you went to school and you were playing some sessions, and then then the next step, how did you get to be sort of a professional drummer? How did you make that kind of jump between that,
So very soon after I think I got it pretty quickly. Like there were some basics, and I wasn't a phenomenal musician, but I got some basics together pretty quickly. And I had these gigs I would say probably within the first year of me playing drums, like I had a regular church gig.
Oh, cool.
And it was with this artist named Joshua Nelson. He's a African-American Jewish gospel singer. And so he started taking me on gigs, and he would take me on the road, and we went to Bermuda
cool?
while I was still in high school. Like
that's cool.
Like playing just a gig on an island. And it was, and I got paid for it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Pretty cool. So he would have these gigs, and then I started doing these jazz gigs. Now, one of the things that happened is I got recommended by a drummer named Mike Hetty. Mike Hetty recommended me for a gig.
Okay.
And I will give him a props, because in some ways that shaped my life.
It's all about who you know. Yeah, man.
he had no idea this was going to happen, but
Yeah, sure.
he recommended me for a gig with a band named No Discipline.
Okay.
No Discipline was your quintessential, they're still playing, is your quintessential New Jersey Shore reggae band.
Oh, okay.
Now, being in New Jersey during the summertime, if you had an inn with reggae bands in the Jersey Shore, you know, throughout the summer, you could potentially have, I mean, I vividly remember more than 1 week where I had somewhere between like 10 and 15 gigs in a week.
My God. Yeah, I mean, you're just playing all day at that point. I mean, you know,
obviously there's
2-3
gigs
a day. Right. Yeah.
Or, you know, you're just, or
house party in the morning, you know, then the gig and then the after gig and then the party after that. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't, I mean, there was a little bit of that. I mean, there would be some after party gigs that were private party. We had, there was private parties were definitely part of it.
Sure.
On the Jersey Shore, but there were also, my kids are running back.
That's all right. Kids do that. That's what kids do. It's what kids run around my school all the time.
There's so many beach bars, tiki bar, and like
outdoor, just venues all over the place. Yeah.
Exactly, outdoor bars right on the beach. People in bathing suits, and so they would want to have reggae music. So it was like, and then once you got in, what would generally happen is sometimes these reggae bands would sort of morph. So suddenly I'm playing, this one bass player couldn't do it, and so they brought in this other bass player, and it was a bigger gig, and they needed to get some more people, so they brought in another bass player, and they brought in this bass player, and
sort
like
of
another
switching out.
Another reggae band.
Right.
And they're like, hey, this guy can play, and my other drummer can't do it. I'm going to give you some tapes. You're going to learn all of this material.
Yeah.
And now so at some point, there was about 5 reggae bands that I was playing in.
Different iterations, different growths, different directions. Sure, yeah.
Some of it was happening in New York. We played like there were some clubs in Brooklyn we started playing at, and Manhattan, Lions. They played at the Lions Den a couple times. Nice. You know, and I'm playing the Jersey Shore, and so I'm studying jazz music. I'm going to school for jazz music, and then I was playing a lot of hip hop gigs at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe with. I used to go sit in. There was a drummer. He's a drummer. He still plays this gig. His name's Chris Edelman. Chris Edelman, and Boris Kozlov played bass, and ATN Cedric played piano. And they would have all of these hip hop artists that were getting stacked from the Bobbito, Stretch Armstrong and Bobbito show. They would wind up. The sequence would be like they would play at the New York Poets Cafe, and then play at this other club, which, you know, I can't remember the name. It's shut down.
Like the little nightly circuit kind of thing. They would go from one to the other.
Circuit that kind of wound up getting you on the radio and a record deal.
Wow. Yeah.
And the Nuyorican Poets Cafe and the underground hip hop scene that was affiliated with that was part of it. So at some point I wound up being the drummer for the show called Words. And so it was like the 3rd Saturday of every month, Nuyorican Poets Cafe. And that's how I got Josh Werner. Josh Werner, I started calling him. We were at the New School at this time. I was at the New School, and he was this bass player, and we were in ensembles together. And so I started calling him for all my hip hop gigs. I know
you can do this. Let's do it.
Like, hey man, it's $40 and a meal. Like, come play hip hop with me. You know, or it's $100, or like we're playing a college, it's $150.
Yeah.
So I started calling him on all these gigs. And the thing about these hip hop gigs, and there was the show called Verse for Verse. Who's now one of the hosts of Verse for Verse is now the mayor of Newark, Amiri Baraka.
Oh, really?
I'm sorry, Amiri Baraka. His son Raz Baraka was one of the hosts.
That's cool.
Of Verse for Verse. So I mean, I used to do this gig with like the now mayor of Newark, New Jersey.
That's cool.
But we were doing these hip hop gigs. So the thing about these hip hop gigs is that you show up and you're set up. And this MC gets up on the microphone. Yeah. And you've got about 5 to 10 seconds to make a musical decision in front of anywhere
hundreds
from, it could be 10 to like 400 people. Or if you're playing at a college, like maybe 1,000 people.
Right.
Or you're playing a battle. There's like an open mic, you know, you're playing I mean, like, you know, so you've got a very short amount of time to make a musical decision.
Decide what you're doing.
Make that musical decision. It has to lock in.
Right.
You're committed to it. It's got to be in the pocket. Right. So me and this bass player really like developed this musical vocabulary, just doing that. I mean, that's just how we, we just started getting everything tight.
Yeah.
So I'm playing gigs, man. Like I was
Yeah.
playing gigs in New Jersey,
Gigging
playing
out.
gigs in New York.
Still in school at the time. I mean, so you were finishing your degree and stuff. Were you going for a degree at New School or? Okay.
I was. So I started going to college. I was studying with Iran Israel at Rutgers Newark. Okay. And then started going to the New School. And I dropped out after a year, and I went on the road. I did one tour, as I mentioned before. I toured the U.S. with King Django, and that was like a reggae rock tour, ska reggae rock tour. And then I toured Europe with a group called the Brooklyn Funk Essentials, which is like a very big acid jazz band. Okay. And they were, and ATN Sedgwick, the keyboardist from the New York Poets Cafe, hooked me up with that gig. Sweet. And then I came back. I did one more semester at the New School, and then it was a little bit pricey for me. I was paying for paying your way. Yeah. Racking up college loans. Sure. Yeah. So then I went to the Rutgers, and because I was studying with Ralph Peterson at the New School. I took some lessons with Ralph Peterson, and he would play trumpet, and he was like, "Hey man, I teach at Rutgers." And at that time, being a state resident and going to school at Rutgers, it was like less than half of the tuition. Oh, okay. Yeah. And so, I would make enough during money during these summers where I could, still cover my rent and still, maintain like my loan payments. Oh, wow. Yeah. So that's where that was. And it was while I was at Rutgers that I started playing Josh Werner, the bassist who I was at the New School with. And I had called him for, every gig. Yeah. I called him for like 150, 250, 300, totally cheesy little gigs. Sure. Yeah. And then he called me for like this one gig. Hey, there's this Orthodox Jewish guy that's singing reggae music. And I told him I know this Jewish drummer that plays reggae music and jazz and hip hop. Yeah. And that's exactly what he was doing. And it just so happened. Yeah. Yeah. Like the universe kind of prepared me for that gig. Yeah. Like I mean, at that time I was more of a reggae drummer than a jazz drummer. I mean, I was playing jazz gigs. I was still playing jazz gigs. Yeah. You're playing out with the reggae stuff and then sitting in with the hip hop stuff. I mean, you're getting a lot of that influence. Yeah. I mean, and you had to, I mean, at the time, like I was constantly listening. Yeah. I was checking. I had to listen to stuff to just stay fresh and current, like with even what was going on in the hip hop community. I mean, I would listen to, mixtapes from DJs that were on the scene. And, with the reggae bands, it was like, I had to be able to play, everything from, like some of the more classic, Jamaican music, which sounded a lot like R&B, a lot like blues shuffles and stuff like that, to, Bob Marley, to the dance hall. What were the dance? We were one of the reggae bands I was playing with. They were staying current with dance hall. They were playing like mostly top 40. They had a top 40 dance hall set ready to go. Yeah. So like all the different rhythms, like whatever rhythm was out, the new rhythm, we would learn the rhythm, and they would bring in the vocalists and sing it. Yeah. So I was playing, and then through that I was, I had some, before that all popped off, like I had like, a few auditions with Antibalas, which is this Afrobeat band. So I was like getting, looked at by Antibalas, and I was thinking about doing that. And, and there's this a guy he's an amazing producer, musician now out named Jesse Fisher. He's still playing music. I was in like one of his first jazz groups, and he was writing tunes all the time. And now he's got multiple records out, and he's on the scene and has at the Blue Note as a band leader, and he's a producer and arranger and a band leader. And so I'm playing these jazz gigs. It's like one night I got a reggae gig down in the shore. The next night I'm playing at Delta's Soul Food Restaurant, playing a jazz set, and then I got the church gig in the morning, and then. And then all of a sudden, and then I went to Korea with this artist named Maggie Kim. And so we were doing these rehearsals, and she was playing pop music. And so I'm rehearsing out there. And then I got like a psychology exam. I'm still trying to get that together. Yeah. Like I'm asking if I could take the makeup exam. Yeah. And then we're doing these gigs with Modest Yahoo, and we're playing like, weird gigs, man, like house parties or Chabad houses. Like we're going up and doing these random gigs. And then one day, Modest, I mean, it's part of the story, but like Modest, he was on CNN, like beatboxing for like 20 seconds.
Okay.
And then it was seen at the Jimmy Kimmel show by the Jimmy Kimmel show. And then all of a sudden we went and we did the Jimmy Kimmel show.
Yeah.
And this is like before Facebook was really a thing.
Right.
You know, the internet, the websites were all like,
it's like late 90s ish, right? Or mid 90s, late 90s, something like early 2000s.
Like 2000.
Yeah.
So it was like 2002.
Okay. I remember the album coming out like early 2000s, you know?
Yeah. And so all of a sudden, like I'm playing the Jimmy Kimmel show.
Yeah.
And then it was like
you're at the Soul Food House one night, Jimmy Kimmel show next day. Yeah.
And then and I was still trying to do gigs. I think actually the tour to Korea came after that. Like I was like, hey, I have to do this tour in Korea.
I signed up, right? Yeah.
But then at that point, I just like I couldn't make up any of my assignments anymore. Like there was no way. And I had gigs booked with Modest Yahoo for like 9 months.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, I have a schedule. I have a 9-month schedule.
There's no way I can do this anymore. Yeah.
And there's, 3 recordings, we're doing 2 records in that time or something. Like it was just crazy.
Yeah.
So that was it. So that was kind of how it happened. So the next real lesson I would say is, we talked about the music.
Yeah.
We talked about, being musically appropriate. We talked about,
synthesizing, knowing your canon and picking your influences.
The other big thing is what they say. What do they say is the definition of luck?
Oh, it's when opportunity and hard work meet, right? Yeah,
opportunity and preparation. And there's probably a couple of other things.
Sure,
but you have to be world class. Mm-hmm. You have to be
already before that opportunity comes. You got to be working the bottom side of that iceberg, man. You got to be doing all of that work already.
and you can absolutely make the opportunity present itself. You can absolutely make the opportunity present itself. And I'm going to give you, this is a lesson that Ralph Peterson gave me. And I wrote about this in my book. I got a couple books that are on my website. You can go on my website and buy them.
Yeah.
Science of Time is a lot of this philosophy that you're going to get. And then there's, interpretations for syncopation, which is just, there's well over 100 ways to interpret like Ted Reed's syncopation book, which I think is like goes very well with like some of the stuff that Alan Dawson taught. And also like there's some things there that are also, it's just like different ways to get mobility and creativity with while still reading music and going through it. And, I do teach through some of this with some people. It's more of a supplemental thing, but it really talks about the first book, The Science of Time, really talks about my philosophy and how to approach music. It's a read, and there's exercises in there, but it's more about how I was the chameleon for all of these different, bands and what I had to do to learn the music and get it together. So you can make, the point is and I tell this story in this book, you can make an opportunity present itself, right?
Okay.
So if you have a dream gig, it's very important to have a vision.
A goal, something you're working towards. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to have a vision. Yes. You got to know. And that dream gig doesn't necessarily, although it does help, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an artist that's alive. Like your dream gig could be, I wish I was every single drummer that Miles Davis ever played with from,
sure, 50s to when he passed or whatever,
to the 80s, right? Like whatever it is. Like I wish I was, from Philly Joe Jones to Lenny White,
everybody in between. Yeah.
Or like even the go-go, like I think at some point, who's the drummer, the go-go drummer, like even like, like the guy who's like playing on the Miles Day, on Doo-Bop or whatever, like up until he started programming, like, and you could even say, and I want to be the guy that programs all the drum tracks for Miles Davis. Like, let's say that's now that's cool. And that would give you a lifetime of work to work on. I mean, you have to
more than a lifetime.
Those guys.
Sure.
But let's say you have an artist that's, alive and contemporary, and this is the guy you want to be with, like whatever, Lassie Washington, whoever whoever is hot on the scene.
Your favorite,
some
somebody you
jazz
love,
artists.
man. Your dream of dreams. Yeah.
That's my dream gig. If I get this gig, at least for me, and I'm assuming if you're thinking about doing this professionally, you're somewhere in your teens to,
Yeah.
20.
Early 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of time to make this happen. You can start, you got to check out that guy's music. You have to make yourself indispensable for that gig.
Yeah.
And that could mean you go to his shows, you learn all of his tunes, you start hijacking the live performances. Maybe you take lessons from his drummer. Maybe you start trying to check out his guitarist's gigs. Maybe you start trying to check out his bass players' gigs, his keyboardist's gigs. If there's any other people, you start looking at their music. You try and get hired to be in their bands. You maybe, if it's a big name thing, maybe it's like just becoming the drum tech. I mean,
sure.
Like
it feels a little bit like light stalking. Like it feels a little bit like we got to be careful what we're encouraging.
I'm not
be careful.
Saying, like start like going on the internet and like sending stuff out.
But be into it.
Like,
be into them. Yeah, right.
But I mean, think about it. Like if you're learning somebody's music and it's like, hey, I'm going to learn every song off of these 10 records that this artist has. So you do that. And you hang out. Now there's an art of a hang. You don't want to be uncool. You got to be cool, right? You have to have social skills. That's part of being prepared. Absolutely. You have to be able to be on the road, right? You got to be. It's like in the military, man. Like if you're not easy to get along with, you're going to come back to your locker on a ship one day and the lock is going to be gone and everything is going to be gone.
Wrong. Yeah.
Nobody saw anything because they just took all your stuff and threw it overboard because people hated you.
Right.
And now all you have is the uniform on your back for the rest of your deployment.
Yeah.
Right. That type of thing happens. So, people are going to get hired because they are so cool to hang out in a tour bus for 4 months.
Absolutely. People will hire someone that's a great fit for the band or the gig with less like technical ability than somebody who's amazing, but you don't want to spend any time with at all.
Exactly. And I talk about that in my book too. Yeah. I mean, there's 3 things and I'm not going to give it all away. Maybe you'll go.
Sure. Yeah. Of course. Go check out your book. We'll do a plug for your book. Yeah.
There's three things in the science of time that I talk about that are important.
Yeah.
But that's one of them, like being cool. So I wouldn't like start, like you don't show up at the guy's house at like 7 a.m. when the guy's getting his newspaper, like with drumsticks and like
new furniture looks great from the yard.
That's strange, right? That's stalking. But you want to set yourself up. Think about it conceptually in this term. You want to set yourself up so if something happened, you would be the only guy that got called.
You're the call.
Like I think like Herb, the drummer at one point he was playing with Primus, like he was the roadie.
Yeah.
And I forget the story, but like one of the drummer just didn't show up and he had been setting up the drums and sound checking and he
knows all the tunes they're doing.
The drummer's not showing up and they're like,
well, we got Herb.
Like, are you going to play? You're going to sit down? And he just, and that was it. And he finished out the rest of the tour.
Yeah.
And what did that do for his career?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It may not happen for you. It's not a guarantee.
No.
But all the tunes that you learned, all the connections you made, all the other tunes that you had to learn or, from other people's bands and so forth and so on, the circles that you're traveling, being cool, passing your name around.
Yeah.
It's going to prepare you for something.
That's right.
It's going to prepare you. And that is part of the luck.
Yeah.
That is part of the, how do you prepare to be lucky?
Sure.
And sometimes, dude, you live in California. I used to go on auditions when I was living out in Burbank, and the first thing they did is take your picture.
Yeah.
Do you look
sometimes? Yeah. Sometimes you don't pass the picture. You don't even have to play. We're like, nah, not really the dude.
Ageism. Yeah. You can't do ageism in the Navy, but you can do ageism in the pop world.
Everywhere else. Yeah. Right.
So, and it's a trip, man. There's a game to play. There's a game.
Yeah.
There's a game to play in if you're in a corporate setting, if you're in, the military, if you're in a civilian, you're running through circles, there's a game you have to play.
Yeah.
And unequivocally how you carry yourself, what you wear, the confidence in which you speak, the way you perform,
Yeah.
what you look like.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all factors. These are all
Absolutely.
factors.
Yeah. I like talking about, being prepared and training for being lucky, like having that opportunity is one thing, and you may get that opportunity, you may not, but you're much more likely to be ready to capitalize on that opportunity if you've been preparing this entire time along. You're not going to walk up, you're not going to get the call from your buddy and he's like, hey, I got this awesome gig. And you're like, oh man, I got to practice for a week before I can go play with Modest, like that's not going to, I mean, you're not going to, what's going to happen? You're going to show up, you're going to suck. They're going to send you home and you're never going to play for anybody ever again.
That's another important thing too. I mean, it's, if you get panned, and I have to really thank in many ways, like Ralph and ATN and the guys, and Bruce,
it happens,
and the guys who really came down on. I mean, Lenny chewed me out a couple of times too, but the guys who really at some point were like, hey, this part of your playing sucks, and therefore you suck. You need to
make that better.
Right. You have to unblank yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You have to make this work.
Right.
They in some ways like shielded me, because I knew I was smart enough, or I was told, like, you need to stop going out and pushing your name out there because you're not ready.
You're not ready to do that. That's right.
You're going to get panned.
Right.
And that can happen. That absolutely can happen.
Yeah.
Or you have to disappear and come back years later like a different cat.
Right. I mean, like you were saying, he encouraged, like your instructor that encouraged you to stay out of the jams for a couple of years. I mean, I think it comes in everyone's life when you're playing and you're performing and you're, young. So people are giving you the benefit of the doubt and you're like playing stuff, and maybe they're taking you aside like they did with you. And like, hopefully that, maybe not like yelling at you, but hopefully you have some people that are frank and honest with you about your playing and stuff, And then there comes a point where you have to kind of marinate on those ideas and really immerse yourself in your sound and the sound you want to have. And oftentimes, I won't say 100% of the time, but I think a lot of times that includes some alone time with your instrument and yourself and your music. And then sort of this like reemergence as like, hey, I was here. You guys helped me get here. All of you folks that contributed to this. Now I've taken all that information. I've synthesized it. I've put it in my heart. I put it in my mind. I put it in my ears. I put it in my soul. And you emerge this sort of butterfly creature where you're like, now I'm something different, and maybe it's a good thing to not go to that jam every day for 15 years. Cause you see, I mean, maybe you've had this experience. I have, it seems common, but you see the same, like I'll go back to Monterey, where I grew up, and like, I see the same guys at the jams that were there when I was like 15 at the jams, and like, dude's good. He's a good player. She's a good player. Like they're cool. They're fine, but they never had that moment where they like really internalized it and figured out what they wanted to do with it and then took it somewhere. They just sort of are doing that gig every Wednesday night at Sly McFly's since the beginning of time. And I'm not down on that either. That sounded a little negative. I'm not down on that. But you have to realize that is where you're putting yourself. If you just want to play Sly, not just want to, if that is enough for you, if that's good for you, then that's cool, man. I'm not judging that. But if you really want to be an artist or a musician, like we're talking about, like that kind of stuff, there has to be that moment where you break from that.
You have to, there's a certain there's a certain sacrifice that just comes with it. And and now you're sort of like getting into like these big life mentorship type of questions.
Sure.
Right? Like you're getting into these, you're not just coaching is like on the job kind of a vibe, like, but mentorship is like, what do you want in life? And so now you're getting into these grass is greener type of things and the evolution of life. I mean, even when we were together at Great Lakes, our priorities are very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
About 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So the 22-year-old me or the 23-year-old me, and I'm turning 43 this month. Nice. My priorities were totally different when I would
hope so. I gotta say, I hope so. You're a different person.
And when I'm 63,
completely different.
It's going to be completely different, right?
Of course.
But there is one thing that I will say, and there's a gentleman who he's very, very old, but he's written a number of books, and he's taught thousands and thousands and thousands of people meditations. And his name is Roy Masters, and you know, he's just a great guy. He has a really great outlook on life. But he has a saying that if you're not committed, then you're going to be committed. Right. And you have to be like, this is what I'm doing. And the truth is that the people that I see who are the most successful at anything in life, not just music, anything in life, have like gotten to the high dive, maybe, you know, like looked around, gave a thumbs up and jumped in, and that's it.
Right.
That's it. And I would even go as far as to say is that depending on how old you are, you know, if you say, hey, I want to play drums when I'm 7, you're going to be a way different drummer. Or I want to play drums when I'm 17, you're going to be a very different drummer when, you know, those two guys with same level of skill sets are going to be very different at the age of 30.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? They're going to be very different. You know, it doesn't happen for anyone. It doesn't happen for anyone. I remember they called him Doc. He was this guitarist, and he would come to the jam sessions. He was a medical doctor. You know, he had a 6-figure salary. He's a medical doctor.
Yeah.
He could play jazz. And he would say, I would have given everything to just be a professional musician. It's like, really? Would you?
But you didn't, though.
Willing to sleep?
You didn't.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. Like, would you be willing to like have, you know, roommates and multiple housemates and roommates in a place where there's, you know, at the time before cell phones, there's only one house phone. Everybody pays that house phone number, and whoever answers the phone would write down the information. If you got called for the gig, that's what you did. Or once cell phones became a thing, like, you know, like eating ramen noodles, like not getting proper, like these are, I mean, you know, and I, you know, even in the Navy, like, I mean, I've come across, you know, musicians before COVID that are phenomenal musicians that have done tours, and they're, you know, out in New York making it happen, doing whatever they need to do. And maybe they got a family, two musicians working together.
Sure.
And they're great. They're amazing. I can't do what they do. I don't understand music the way they do. You know, they're amazing. And they're like trying to make rent from month to month. Yeah. And that is their life. Yep. I mean, that might be cool in the 20s.
Sounds a lot cooler than it is, man. It's not right. I
mean, and so now here's the thing for people that, if I have any friends that are in that situation, I love you guys.
Yeah, sure.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, if I didn't have the military, I didn't have the military gig, I would be hustling from gig to gig.
That is what you do as a musician, more than not. I mean, more than not.
You know, but it's like, but the thought, I mean, I'll be honest, but like if I'm 20 and I'm thinking like, okay, this is what I want to do when I'm 60. I mean, that can become challenging.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
You know, just, I don't know if that's where I would want to be.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to retire, like, you know, so most musicians, the reason why I'm saying this is that the vast majority of musicians wind up having something else that they do, especially if they want to have a family.
Sure.
But it's a sacrifice. If you just want to be a professional musician and you're willing to commit the 4 to 8 hours a day of practicing and playing the game and making it happen, I mean, you know, COVID is going to go away eventually.
Sure.
And I don't know if that means that you're just going to have to be, you know, for me, like in this, I mean, that was a totally different day and age too. I mean, now it's like, you know, your video editing and Pro Tools skills, Pro Tools
that matters a lot.
More of a commodity.
That's right. I mean, that's part of what the landscape, that exactly what you're talking about, man. Like you did come up in a sort of musical generation that was, you know, I love music. I love live performance. I do, man. You know, I love going to shows. Most people do, you know, like that way that you're talking about like, you know, getting in a van and like traveling around, like making gigs and stuff. Like that's not really how people are doing that anymore. Like there's a new way that is pretty old school at this point, and probably not a lot of the kids that are coming through School of Rock, and not a lot of kids that are interested in music anyway, even have that thought that like, that's what they want to do. Their thought is like, I'm going to start making videos on YouTube. You know, I'm going to get 1 million subscribers. And that's, you know, that's the new I'm going to start a band on and take our van and go on tour. You know, like that's the new dream. The dream is no longer, you know, we're going to start this band and get picked up by a label and stuff. Maybe it is, but mostly what I see in kids and in, you know, the younger generation is that they want to do something with, it's going to either involve recording, it's going to involve video, it's going to involve something online where they're sharing, streaming, something like that, you know. So preparing the kids for that, you know, next generation and that reality with these lessons that we've sort of learned and the things that we know from the way it sort of used to work, like the old world skills, which don't die. I mean, they're not useless skills, you know, they're still very valuable lessons. And then
play your instrument. You still have to be able to play your instrument.
Have to. Absolutely. No question about that. Nothing's going to replace that, you know.
I'm a dinosaur, dude. I'm just, you know, I'm waiting to go extinct, man.
Dude, I mean, you know, your everyday is a little bit closer to that. And really the only way that you sort of stay relevant, not even relevant, the way that I stay inspired about music is that I look to the younger generation. Like I look to the people that are younger than me because they're going to point the way to where the future is going to go. It's not like I know that like, oh, Twitch is cool and I should be streaming on Twitch. Like Chris Cobb, I don't really know that, but I see the next generation and I talk to musicians that are young and I talk to people that are interested in doing this and that's what they want to do. And then I'm like, oh, I wonder what that is. And then I go check it out and I'm like, there's this whole world of like tens of millions of people that know about this thing that I didn't even know about. You know, I'm like, goodness gracious.
I mean, it's shocking how that happened. Right. You know, and it's interesting. You know, some of my other teachers have sort of imparted this on me, but there's a level of respect. Like I'm always going to give the level of respect. I like when I call up Ralph Peterson and I talk to him, I don't just say, "Hey, what's going on, man?"
Yeah.
You know, what's going on, professor? Like I'm gonna acknowledge that he did something in a different time to much greater capacity than I could ever possibly imagine.
Sure.
Even you know, even if they never, you know, like you sort of just, I think there is something about respecting the previous generation and what lessons that you can be learned. So I also feel that there's this sort of crotchety old guy that's growing, you know,
stronger every day.
You know everything. Right. You know, I mean, I feel like you need to have that guy too, kind of around. Like,
I guess
you don't totally, because here's the thing. Like, I thought Twitch was pretty much exclusively for gaming. I didn't realize that Twitch was,
dude, it's a whole platform, man.
Yeah. Whole platform, right? Yeah. So I thought it was gamers that were getting compensated to play games online.
Indeed, what I thought. Yes.
So so I didn't realize it was music, but the what I'm noticing, and we're maybe going full circle with this, but about going into the canons is that because the information used to be sacred. The information used to be sacred. When you would go to a guitar lesson,
knowledge.
The knowledge, you had to pay for the knowledge.
Valuable.
You had to do it, you know, and you have to sit there and your teacher would close the door and sit down and I'm going to give you the knowledge. Right. You're paying it and you have to earn it. If you're not prepared, then you're not coming to this next lesson.
Right.
Now you have an overabundance of knowledge. There is so much information.
I would say information. I'm not sure I would call all of it knowledge, but certainly information. There's a ton of information out there.
You know, and there's all of these guys that can play a lot of drum, and it looks slick and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Definitely, you know, there's definitely a realm for that.
Yes.
But I think what is happening is that a lot of these guys are all sounding the same. In a lot of ways, and I'm making a very generalization.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of, I mean, I'm not saying that people don't sound differently, but you know, the real, like when like after a bunch of YouTube drummer videos, you know, what gets me through the video is the guy telling jokes. You know, at some point it becomes, is this guy funny?
Right. Sure. Yeah. Why do I want to watch this?
A different setup.
Right.
But a lot of this stuff just sounds very similar to my ear.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't sound different the way, you know, like the way that Elvin Jones sounds totally different from, you know,
Billy Joe Jones,
sure. or Billy Higgins or whatever.
Sure.
Like when I hear about like those drummers, like even within like the metal realm or the hard hitting realm, like, these guys that are playing double bass drum chops, and
Yeah.
these bands like Avenged Sevenfold, or whatever, these guys that are amazing drummers. Like, I don't know if I mean, there would be a real difference in sound. I mean, if you're a fan and you know those tunes, and I admittedly don't know these tunes, so I'm not a huge fan. But I mean, if you put on like a mix of these songs, I would have a difficult time as a layperson saying, I'd be like, is this the same band? Is this all kind of the same band? Like, and that's what I'm getting from now that might be my ignorance, but that's kind of what I get from a lot of these YouTube drummers.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's some cool education stuff out there, but it's almost like feedback. It's this recycling of information that is going on.
What happens when you have a ton of information is that you start to learn less, and you start to just regurgitate information. So you have a ton of information, and you think that that's everything, that the information is the end of the road. Like, I have now acquired all of the information about all of the drummers of all of the world,
Yep.
That is not playing like those drummers. That is not taking that style, synthesizing it, and interpreting it. That is just regurgitating what someone else has done before.
And I think it's also, like taking a lot out of the music. I mean,
yeah,
I think there's, again, it's just going back. The music should dictate. And it's not like there aren't like these awesome creative drummers that are coming out, or composers. There's still people composing. There's still people.
Absolutely. Amazing talent, man. Yeah, dude. All over the place.
But it's like, for even now, like, I'm having this conversation, like putting things in perspective. Like, one of the things I want to do now that I'm back from Italy and I'm in the States is I want to really start writing my own music. I want to write my own record. I want to write, and I want to put out my own jazz record.
Yeah.
I want to say some of the things that have been in my mind with some of the compositions, or get serious about writing it and put it out there. And it, is it gonna, and that immediately puts me into like the same category as every other amazing drummer or every amazing band leader that's put out their own record. Now, how am I going to be, compared to by the critics is not necessarily, not my business. But even just having this conversation, it's like, maybe I should just be focused on developing a lucrative YouTube channel, because if I put out this record that's just music, like, nobody's going to buy. I don't know if I'm probably not going to print up a lot of CDs. I mean, it's probably just going to go straight to digital download, but like, am I going to break even?
Right.
Am I going to do it because I love to do it and I feel like I just want to have something that outlived me? Or should I put the effort into, crafting my online personality?
Sure.
Hey, kids.
Yeah.
And, and
be the Blippy of drums.
Yeah, whatever. Exactly. I mean, I don't know. It's just, these are all things to think about.
It's the two sides of that coin, the money and the music, or the creativity, and then the rubber meeting the road. Like, I got to make a living, and I got a family, and I got this and that going on, but I also want to be creative and say something musically,
I mean, I don't know enough about the monetization of YouTube or Twitch, but I do know that, if you have, I don't even know. Does Instagram monetize views? I don't think so.
No, you can't. Their Instagram, subscribe, they don't monetize views.
Right. I mean, you can be an influencer. You can still wind up if you
get free stuff. They pay you to do things. You go to events for free, that kind of stuff. That's more the Instagram vibe. To actually monetize and make money, YouTube is generally the main source of that.
Right. And I mean, so you have to have, you have to break into that. I mean, that takes time. You have to have a certain number of views and a certain number of videos and how many hours are watched. And so, that takes content, so putting quality content and time and video editing and, there
are whole teams of people that do that stuff, man. I mean, it's not, most of the really good YouTubers, I know it sort of presents as them sitting in front of the camera, but there are teams of people that help them to put out their content. It's not just that dude sitting there or that girl putting on her makeup. That is almost never the case. There's a team of people that it takes to do that.
Yeah, no, it's a real thing, man.
Yeah. Well,
so, yeah,
man, dude. So then the last thing I want to touch on is now you're an instructor. And so you've sort of come full circle. You had these amazing guys, girls, whoever press sounds, maybe guys exclusively, but teaching you and bringing you up and in the scene and doing stuff. You were able to go on tour, and like now you sort of reached the grandpa stage of the musician life, where it's like now you want to give back, or you want to contribute, you want to do something, you want to teach the next generation. That's sort of where, you know, where I am and where a lot of guys are. You know, you want to give back a little bit and do something. What is it that you like about teaching? What is it that you want to instill in your students? Like, what is it that you try to impart to them? Like, how do you impart to them, not just your knowledge, but an excitement for the instrument and a want to kind of develop their own path in music?
So you have to be excited.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be excited. If you want it, I mean, it's infectious.
Yeah.
Passion is infectious. The commitment to your path is the, you know, the devotion to it, the faith in yourself is infectious. You know, one of the things I just want to briefly mention before I answer the question, one of the things I really like about the way I teach is that I really had to strip away a lot of the things that didn't help me from all the different teachers that I had.
Sure.
And I learned a lot of different things. And so when I really found out, okay, this is what was not good, and this is what I needed to fix. Yeah. And oh, by the way, this is the number one thing that everybody's dealing with.
Right.
A lot of what I teach is from student to student is very, very similar. Now it does depend. Like if I have a 5-year-old kid that like, and I've taught young kids. Actually, one of the youngest kids I taught, he's now like an actor in LA, and he still plays drums and bass and guitar. But
yeah,
well, for him, I just would get him to sing and clap and be excited, and
yeah,
like he would learn a Beatles tune, and he didn't know the drum part, but he knew all the rhythms for the melodies. Oh, yeah. So he'd be like playing the rhythms of the melodies on the drums.
Sweet.
And I'd say, hey, we'll play those on the toms and play those on your foot. And I'm like, just try to make it happen on your foot, and you know, and try and do it like this. And for that, there's nothing scripted. But when you're starting to get to a person that's saying, hey, like I said, that moment where, you know, I don't know what I want to do, but this is going to be part of it. Yeah. Or I'm going to give this a shot at the expense of everything else because I don't know if I can live with. I had one of those moments too. Like, I don't know if I could live with myself knowing that I could have tried to be a professional musician and didn't give it my all. Yeah. Right. Yeah. If you're starting to get into that point where it's like, hey, I am going to devote 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day to this instrument. Yeah. Then you have to start, you owe it to the student to give them the long road.
Sure.
You owe it to the student. Now they have to do their due diligence, but the way it really, I think, is best broken down is that the teaching is kind of like a Rubik's Cube. It's kind of like a cube. There's
full circle.
More than one side of it. We're coming around full circle a couple times here. So, you know, on one side, you have to have technique. I mean, you can't just have technique.
Yeah.
You have to know the physical mechanics of the instrument and what you have to do. And then on another side, you have to have some of the theory. You have to have some of that. You have to have some of the scales. On another side, you have to have, you know, good gear.
Sure.
You have to have the right, you know, you have to have the right tools for the job. And another side, you have to have, you know, the music. You have to be steeped in the music. You have to have the canon.
Yeah.
And then, you know, on another side, you have to have maybe the literature. I mean, maybe if it's reading, if you're looking at just a different aspect of this, are you going to be someone that learns by ear? Are you going to be someone that can read? And so there's an educational aspect to it as well. So there's all of these different things that you really owe it to the student to see that they need to develop this.
Yeah.
The challenge comes from figuring out how they learn.
Oh, sure.
Because you can have all of this information that you want to instill in your student, and you're this super visual teacher, and you've got this super audio learning student.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so you have to, so getting someone, you know, knowing that you have two guys that are great, and one guy is just really emotional, and or gal or whatever, and then you have another student, and one, this guy or gal is just really, really motivated, but they're both putting in the same amount of work and they're putting in the same amount of time.
Yeah.
Like if you're seeing a deficiency in both of them, the one that's emotional, you might not be able to go heavy-handed with that.
Right.
You might have to, you might have to find another way. You might have to start asking questions like, what do you really want?
Right. Yeah.
What are you trying to accomplish?
Right.
Remind that of yourself so that you can do this. And the person that's, maybe being a little bit more insubordinate or whatever, just blowing it off, you might have to say, hey, if you come back at me like this again, I'm not going to teach you anymore. We're done.
Sure.
You're not going to make it.
Sure.
And so that's kind of the challenge. And what's really sort of making it enjoyable for me, the passion for me, like knowing how far to open the spigot. Because if you have someone that's really, really knowledgeable, 2 or 3 hours with that person could be, hey, I have enough to work on for the next year.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and by the way, like with this one page here, here are the 50 variations that you can come up with, and the 50 other variations that you can come up with.
Okay, see you in a decade. I'll be back for my second lesson.
I mean that could be maybe detrimental if you're a teacher.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
you definitely don't want to do that to like a 12-year-old.
It's overwhelming, man. You can't do all that stuff.
Right. But, someone that's like with you for like, so this particular situation, I'm throwing the bus at these guys because I get 6, maybe 3, if they've accelerated out months with these drummers
to turn them into some sort of a jazz drummer. Yeah.
And we're not doing that. I mean, we're going over mallets. I have to make sure that they're proficient.
All of
enough
it,
so
the
that
percussion
they can
stuff.
Any type of
mallet,
to deal with. There's a lot of snare drum, classical and ornamental snare drum. So we have to make sure that their hands are okay, and then they have to be ready to to sit behind a band. So so depending on where they come in, sometimes you have a student that's very good at drum set. My disciplines have been centered more around drum set, more so in the classical world. Sure. I had to spend a lot more time working on my snare drum and my mallet chops.
Yeah.
To even get this position. But sometimes you guys that come in and they can do anything in the world on mallets. They can sight read all types of fly 4-part writing, and they've got great hands, and they don't have the coordination to play quarter notes with their right hand and their right foot at the same time.
Right.
It's almost like, I don't know if you're going to pass.
Yeah.
Because drum set is a
totally different thing and a big part of it. Right.
It's 40% of the grade of the curriculum that we have to do. Right. Yeah. So 40% of your grade, is drum set playing. And to be perfectly honest, if you can't play drum set, you're not going to function at this job.
Right.
So you're getting these guys of varying,
varying interests, varying levels,
finding what you need.
So how do you try to inspire them on either side? If you're classical trying to learn kit, I mean, how are you keeping them passionate and excited about it?
So that is for me, a lot of that, has to do with my passion.
Sharing that with them.
Knowing that aside from the fact that they can receive disciplinary action, right?
Sure.
You have to think about it. Right. But
sure.
It's my passion. It's like, hey, I'm giving you 100% of my focus and attention to help you.
Yeah.
I am not dialing it in.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not just saying, all right, here's your lesson plan. I mean, you could do that. You could say, hey, I'm going to construct, 50 lesson plans, and okay, you're at week 1.
Here it is.
Week 1.
Right.
Let me see what come back week 2. Let me see your week 2. Let me see your week 1. Okay, great. Here's your week 2. Keep moving forward. And you could have a mallet path and a snare drum path and a drum set path.
Sure.
I mean, that would require a significant amount of work up front.
Sure.
But you could theoretically just be, blasé about it and not. Right. And not really.
Well, and some instructors are that because that's a pretty easy route, man. You just photocopy some sheets. Every lesson's the same, and you just go for it, and cash your paycheck, man. And that's not, to me, that's not really teaching. That's you're just showing up.
You have to be passionate because sometimes these guys have things going on.
Sure, all the time. They always have something.
And Marines, they have real life events happen.
Yeah.
You know, people are experiencing pain. Sometimes people are experiencing loss or
Right,
injury
right.
or, you know, frustration, emotional. I mean, they're, you know, the military institutionalization
Yeah.
is a very
Can be
serious thing. I
difficult.
mean, you went to
Yeah.
basic training,
Yeah.
and you're dealing with an 18-year-old, 19-year-old Marine. You get a guy in his like 20s, and they're coming in, and, you know, getting them to a place where they can be receptive,
Yeah.
where they're not afraid, where I'm not just like, I'm not standing them at it. Look, dude, I'm not standing you at attention. I'm teaching you how to play drums.
Right. Right.
You know, it takes a little bit of there's a certain
Convincing.
personality too.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and that goes into just being yourself,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Being
man.
yourself, being humorous.
I've always appreciated your teaching style. And I think that it comes, you know, what I think of and why I was interested to kind of, among other reasons, have you come on and talk a little bit about your experiences, because I think that those things, and I knew, you know, a little bit about your history, and we had talked before, and we've known each other for a while now.
Yeah.
The things that you went through and coming up in that way, in the sort of old school kind of cutting session, the way that you came up, I think has informed the way that you instruct. And I was really impressed. In Chicago, there was a person that we worked with, and you know who it is, and I will not talk about this person, but there was someone that was having some trouble with something there, you know, at the band. And this person was not really, they were catching some flack and weren't really maybe able to do the job as well as they thought that they were going to be able to when they came in, you know, and were expected to, really, you know, like you're expected at a certain level that you need to meet when you go to a fleet band. You're in the military music program. There's a level of expectation. We are the taxpayers of this country are paying you to do this job. You need to have some certain level of proficiency. And this person was not particularly up to that. And there is a tendency when you get a job as a musician or anything, you know, like as a business person, whatever it is, you land this position, and then it somehow puts in you that like you either like deserve to be there or somehow you won this spot. You get a little bit like jaded, and it's hard to take instruction sometimes. So there were two things that happened. One was you were very dedicated to helping this person, honestly, and above and beyond. I mean, you would stay after hours to practice with this person. You would help them out in like specific sessions and helping them to learn and to grow as an individual. But also, you were very good at breaking down those walls with, I mean, this person was receptive to it and wanted to learn, and that's part of it too. You have to want to learn. But if you approach it the wrong way, if you're like, you know, and again, like there is a time for yelling at people at the cutting session. Like I would never say that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. But in the day and age we're in with like millennials and the younger generation and stuff, we're talking about somebody that is from the younger generation. Like that doesn't elicit the response that it once did. It doesn't generally elicit that response like, oh, I'm terrible, I'm horrible, I'm going to go practice more. It generally elicits a response like, this was awful, I'm never doing this again, you know? And you just put people in this fear state where they don't want to come back. So it was this great dedication that you had to this other person's learning and developing them for the band's sake too. I mean, it was definitely nice to have, you know, I mean, there were other reasons there, but your dedication to that person and then the ability to lock in with them and address them with like, hey man, you know, you have this way of like calling somebody out where they're like, ah, dude, I really am kind of like lagging here, but it feels like, okay, it's like, oh, but he's here with me. He's going to help me. Like we're in this together, you know, like, hey, you're not cutting it now, but the end of the sentence is, but we can get you there. You know what I mean? Like we can make this happen for you. And so, you know, I'm not sure I expressed it to you ever really in those terms, but that's one of the reasons that I sort of wanted you to come on. And one of the reasons I really respect you as a person and educator and all that stuff, man, is, you know, that experience that I saw you go through. And so I'm very interested in, you know, how you approach that and your thoughts behind that kind of stuff, you know?
All right. Thanks, man. That was, yeah, I mean, and I'll just to I don't know if you remember this term, but to piggyback off of
I was hoping I would never hear it again.
to piggyback off of that, I think that is one of the beautiful things about the military music program. And the level of guys. I mean, we're getting guys that are coming in with doctorates now.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
I remember one of the fleet bands recently, they just had an audition within the past year for 2 positions on clarinet, and like 44 people flew out from around the country to do a centralized audition. And they were only hiring 2 people. I mean, so, you know, the thing about these bands is that we are in it together. It is a challenge because you could become blasé. You could go in
Right.
there and it could be
It's a job.
a bad experience for you,
Yeah.
and you can make it very difficult for everybody else.
Yeah.
But as people are in it together, you could, as this individual was, you could be open to receiving some feedback.
Right.
And the people that stay after to work with you,
Yeah.
I mean, it can be very, very rewarding. I mean, the military music program is a very, very rewarding experience.
Yeah.
I don't just play music.
Sure.
I mean, the deal. There's lots of other things that I have to do
Right.
that are, in some ways, I would say, much more involved than running your own business as an independent contractor musician.
Right.
You know, even like almost, I would say that the average musician that's been in the Navy music program has a set of skills to be like a band leader that would take a band out on the road and get them through all of the logistics of doing that,
Right.
including the music. I mean, you just have to learn these skills
Right.
in this organization. So you have this, but you're on that team,
Mhm.
and you got to make lemonade. If you got,
Yeah.
you got to make lemonade.
Sure.
If you're surrounded by some people, and this is your band, and this guy's lacking, it's almost like you have to bow down to the lowest common denominator. Like,
Right.
So yes, as a drummer, as a sideman, your job is to honor
Whoever's
your job
paying
is
your
to
bill,
honor
whoever the front person is, whoever's paying your check, man.
paying your check. But if you're in a band, right, and you are trying to make that work, you really need to make the worst person in that band sound good.
Yeah.
That is an unwritten law.
Yeah.
And if it happens to be a bass player,
Sure.
or a guitarist,
Yep.
or whatever,
Yep.
like, and the band has to go out and perform, you can't be throwing music at the band that's going to set somebody up to fail.
Yeah, that's right.
You got to push. I mean, at some point,
Yeah.
yeah,
You got to
like,
sound
might have
good.
to
You're doing a
corners, like,
gig.
I might have to just, hey man, you just need to find the 1 and the 5s, man. Like,
Right.
it is, whatever. But you have to make that guy sound good. And
Right.
if you don't make him sound good, and that's really a selfless thing.
Yeah.
That's serving the music. I mean,
Right.
I'm going to say this like the third time. The music's going to dictate. You have to serve the music.
Right.
And if the music is dictated by, if you're playing with somebody that's only coming at a certain level, you can't just mow him over.
Right.
You can't set him up to fail. You have to be ready to make the band sound good.
Right.
And that is of service. And being in the military is of service. So I think is a lot of similarities with just the mindset of like, what it is.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, just like you mentioned before, not everybody can be in the military.
Right.
There's 99% of the population is not qualified to do the gig.
Right.
And so 99% of the population of musicians is not, qualified to be in that upper echelon of, you're making like, $300,000, $400,000 a year as a sideman.
Right. Yeah. Most of them, I'm smaller than 1%. I mean, a very tiny percentage of musicians make it.
It's a tiny percent. I mean, like being a professional musician, like I will say that being a professional military musician, just puts you in that top 1.5, 2%.
You have a career as a musician.
You're getting paid to be a musician and run a business, which is what, if you're a sideman, if you're a professional musician, you can't just expect the phone to ring. Like you are in a business. You have to pay your own taxes. You have to cover your expenses. You have to know your overhead. You have to know, you have to be able to say,
how do you get from here to there? No. Who's putting you up in the hotel? Can you do it cheaper? What's your per diem rate? Are you eating somewhere? Are you not? How are you managing your finances on the road? Like, how are you, any of that stuff.
It's not just about playing music. So you have to be a business owner.
Yeah.
As a School of Rock franchise. I mean, there's probably 1,000 things that you encounter that you never thought you were going to be dealing with when you were first learning how to play,
no way.
You're whatever.
Mary had a little lamb. Do 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 do. Yeah, right. Right. Yeah.
By Eddie.
Man, dude. Gosh, I know.
So so these are all important things, man. I think that's, and so you just there's a lot of things that going into teaching. And all the techniques. There's different techniques. I mean, that in and of itself is, I mean,
sure.
you know, forget it. I mean, there's
and the proof is in the pudding, man. Like that guy took that instruction and ran with it, man. Like, I mean, he did a lot of stuff. I will say he's not, you know, he chose not really to continue in music much anymore, but man, he got exponentially better while we were playing together. And like, I mean, he improved, you know, like I mean, you can, the lesson there is you can get better no matter where you start. If you're open to experience and you're willing to learn and work with somebody, you'll find somebody that'll work with you, and you can improve no matter what level of the game you're at.
Absolutely. And that's, and I guess the final lesson, because we've been going at this for,
I know. Well, we tend to talk a little bit, man. You know?
2 hours here.
That's right.
But you know, the final lesson would really be that it's not about a point of destination. There's no arrival point.
Right.
It's the process.
Right.
It's the process.
There's only one arrival point, and it happens at the end, and then there's nothing really after you arrive there.
Right. When you're on the other side of the ground.
Right. Yeah. You have arrived elsewhere. Right? That's right. Yeah.
I mean, I just saw a video of a guy who's like in his 90s with Alzheimer's or something, but he still knows how to play piano.
Oh, sweet.
Like there's part of that brain which wasn't
music is crazy like that.
You know,
yeah.
Amazing, right? So as you know, putting yourself into there's a guy named Rob Knopper, and he's an exceptional educator, and he plays I think he's got the Philharmonic gig, but he does all of these audition prep courses. And so he talks about being in this mindset of always getting ready for an audition, which is, I think, very stressful. And he talks about just being used to that, getting used to that stress. And that if you can get used to that, you'll always be able to perform, because you'll never be
auditioning. Right.
Well, you'll never be worried about
you're always ready
performing on stage.
Right.
You're just in this, you know, I wonder, just like the coronavirus in some ways, like I'm wondering how that's going to affect a person 20 years, like constantly exposed to that level of stress. But the point is that like I go in and I try and practice things, and I have an agenda, and there's these pockets of information that I am working on, and they are very difficult. And I will get to a point after a couple of hours of practice, or maybe after 20 minutes of working on something, where like I physically cannot do something.
Right.
I cannot get to the point where I am patting my head and rubbing my belly at the same time.
Yeah.
I just can't do it.
Right.
And you got to hit it again the next day. Or you got to take a break. You have to but you have to put your brain in these incredibly tensed situations where you are forcing it into your body, into this deep lizard part of your brain where I'm trying to make it happen. And then you have to have that collapse, that rest, that breathing, and you know, not working on that the next day, or you know, touching it the following day after that. Like you have to have this system, and then these memories, these deep memories, they start to come. And it gets more difficult when you get older. Like you learn faster when you're younger. It's just part of aging. But you can continue to age. I mean, you can continue to learn as you age. You can. It's never an ending point. There's never going to be a point where you're like, oh, I've learned it all. And let's say you have learned it all. It's still a perishable skill. So you can learn all of it.
Maintain it.
You stop playing for 10 years and you come back to it. It's going to be
different.
Man, it's not going to all be there, you know. So keep at it. And if you sign up for the School of Rock in Santa Ana, you know, like get with this guy.
I appreciate that,
man. And stick with him. I've known Chris for a long time. You're not going to find a more beautiful soul. You're not going to find a more laid back guy that'll still tell you the truth and give it to you, you know, right as you need it. You know, learn as much as you can, learn the music, you know, get the opportunity to play as much as possible. School of Rock, you know, I never got a chance to do that. I went to jam sessions.
Dude, it's
there
so
was
cool.
no School of Rock when I was a kid.
Yeah, I
There was
know.
a jam session at a soul food restaurant.
Then you get yelled at afterwards.
But get to play music, learn the tunes, practice every day, push yourself to get better. Check yourself out, record yourself, learn how to read, learn how to be a great musician, make yourself indispensable for your dream gig.
That's right.
You know, go out there and do it. And, you know, if it's something that you want to do professionally, like don't listen to anybody else. Just do it.
That's right.
And if it's something that you're like, hey, I love music and I want to be a great musician, but I also want to be a brain surgeon, then do that.
Probably go be a brain surgeon. Yeah, right.
Be a brain surgeon.
If there's a but at the end of that statement, if you're like, man, I really love playing music, but then do the other thing. Cause like,
yeah, if you want a stable job, or if you want to open up, a business, or if you want to, get into real estate, or get into medicine, or get into law, or become a fireman, or whatever you want to do, you might find that you're, of a varying, there's different IQs, there's different intelligences, different physical intelligences, different intellectual intelligences. Right, you'll find what you're good at, whatever you decide to do, you're going to get better at that too.
Yeah.
You're going to continue to improve. Whatever plant you water is the plant that's going to grow.
Yeah.
And you just keep pushing and working on it.
Yeah.
And figuring it out,
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And be open to those things, man. Yeah. Music can be a big part of your life. It doesn't have to be the only part of your life. But if you want to be serious about it, it has to be kind of the only part of your life. There are just different things that, there's different ways to manage that, man.
Of course.
Appreciate that, Jonah, man. So is it still JonahDavidDrums.com? Did you change your, where are you going now? Where am I going to get your book, man?
I think, let me look at this. It's, let me look at my website here.
You got to look at your own website to tell me what your website is.
Just JonahDavid.com.
JonahDavid.com. Okay.
www.jonahdavid.com.
JonahDavid.com.
And there's a couple of links. There's a couple of pictures, a little bit about me. I'm not as active on that website as I should be. But
that's all right.
It's still a way to get my book, and still a way to reach out to me if you want to, or you can find me on Facebook. I have a band page on Facebook, and I also have a personal page on Facebook. And if any of your students, if there are any questions, or want to know more about some, some things, I'd be happy to do a Zoom lesson. I'm available for online lessons too.
Right on.
So you can.
Oh, don't worry. We'll be calling you. You'll be doing some workshops and some camps. I got all kinds of things planned for you, Mr. David. Don't you worry about that, buddy.
I mean, once everything opens back up again, I got family out in California.
That's right. You're going to be coming out. I got a workshop all planned for you, buddy. I'll send you the curriculum. You'll be golden, man. You'll be good.
Yeah. And just because this is a music thing, I just also want to take the time to thank some of the companies that have continued to, be in my life, that, have always just stood by me. Sabian Cymbals, DW Drums, Vic Firth drumsticks, Evans Drumheads, Prologics, percussion, Audix mics, all these, and Humes and Berg cases. These are companies that have, just they're like, hey, we'll hook you up. Nice. And they had faith in me, and when I had the gig, and they were there for me, and it's important. It's important to go out and buy good gear.
Yes.
And if you want to be taken seriously, you have to have good gear. And especially in this day and age, go out and buy instruments.
Yeah.
Go out and buy yourself a good DW drum set, or a PDP drum set. Yeah. Sabian makes amazing cymbals. Vic Firth makes the best drumsticks. Evans drum heads, all those, and Evans is part of other companies, Audix. There's great mics that you can get for recording. Yeah. I'm not like plugging them. Like, they're not paying me to say this stuff. And it's been a long time since I've made a purchase from them, but these companies are run by really good people that I could call up and I could talk to about the holiday or the weather or what's going on, and they will return my call.
Yeah.
So when we come out and we do this workshop, man, when we get the drum clinic going, and I come out there, I'll have some giveaways. I'll have some stuff to, hand out.
I'm ready, man. I'm ready. Well, we're not ready quite yet. The school's going to be open soon, but we're getting ready.
Yeah. We'll make it happen though, man.
That's right, man. Yeah, dude. I appreciate you, man. Yeah. I'm glad to talk to you, man. We gotta do this. This was a lot of fun, man. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
No, it was great. It was great doing it, man. So
right on, brother.
Have a great day, everyone.
Yes, sir.
We got the time zone difference, so I got to get ready.
Of course, man. Yeah. Thank you for joining me, man. Jonah David, check him out, JonahDavid.com. Check out his book. He knows everything there is to know about rhythms and the science of time, man. All them good stuff. Love you, brother. Right. Take it easy, man. We'll see you. Peace, man. Bye.
School of Rock. Santa Ana.